So what if you were on the way to the gallows and you're thinking that this is going to be a very quick, very easy way to die? You've accepted the fact that it's going to happen. And you get there, but then something completely, utterly wrong happens. And then it makes you wonder, was this karma or was it a mistake? Well, today we're going to talk about Britain's first female serial killer, and the reason why we're going to talk about her is because of how she killed. Her name was Mary Ann Cotton, and like I say, she was Britain's first female serial killer, and her weapon of choice, I guess you could say, was arsenic. It was so easy to get arsenic and things like that back then. But we're going to go over her story today. It is a wild one. There's a lot of names that I'm going to have to look at my paper to remember because she kills a lot of people. Okay, I'm just saying. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get this party started. So, today we're going to talk about Mary Ann Cotton and what she did, basically, and how she got the takedown and what happened to her when she got to the gallows, which is the most interesting part of the whole entire thing. Mary Ann was born on October 31st of 1832, so we have another one that was born on Halloween, which I think is pretty cool, yeah. And she had a mom and a dad, and her mom's name was Margaret, and her dad's name was Michael. And Michael was a coal miner. Okay, and so they lived in a little coal town community. They lived in the housing and things like that that was provided by the coal company that he worked for, and so they were living, not too shabby. She's intelligent. She keeps herself very clean, very well presented. And so everybody has a lot of good things to say about Mary Ann in her younger years now, saying she went to church a lot, and that she was very innocent looking, and, all this other kind of stuff. Well, her and her family, she has a brother and a sister, but her sister ends up dying. And her family ends up moving to a different town, okay? And around this time, she's about 12 years old, Mary Ann's dad falls down a mine shaft 150 feet all the way down, and of course he dies. Now, the way the coal company sent his remains back to his family is enough trauma on itself. They sent this man's body back to his family inside of a sack, like a coal sack, I guess you could say, with the coal company stamped on it, property of such and such coal company. Like, how do you do that? And then, of course, since he passed, they can no longer live in the housing situation that they were in. So what happened? Her mom ends up getting remarried. Her mom marries a guy named George Stott, and he was also a miner, so I'm guessing this kind of secured a spot for them again back in the community. But by the time Mary Ann is 16 years old, she wants to be a nurse. Yes. Just like last week, our guy was a doctor. She's a nurse, so she has knowledge of medicines and poisons and cures and all that other kind of stuff, right? So she ends up going and becoming a nurse to a guy named Edward Potter, who is the manager of the coal company that her dad had worked for. But after Edward's kids were sent to some kind of probably boarding school or something, there was no more need for Mary Ann to be there. And you'll kind of see why as we go a little bit forward. Now, supposedly Mary Ann, after her time with the coal miner guy, and his kids go off to school, so she doesn't have a job. She ends up finding a guy, and he ends up becoming her very first husband. And when I say first, this is one of four. Yeah, one of four. She has a lot of husbands in this, but you'll see what happens to them, as I'm sure that you're already knowing, but that's okay. because it's not just the husbands in this instance. Unfortunately, no, it's not. So she marries her first husband in 1852, and his name is William Mowbray. They move out to Durham County, yeah. And while they're out there for about 5-6 years or so, they have like 4 or 5 kids. But when they return back to the city after they've been in the country for a while, they don't have any kids. All their kids died out in the country, like shortly after birth, all from gastric fever. Okay. Like, how they didn't catch on then, I don't know. But I do know this. I do know that they didn't start recording people's deaths for a while. Like, they recorded births and, of course, like baptisms and things like that. But they never recorded, like, giving people, like, death certificates and things like that until later on. And so we don't know exactly what happened to these kids. I don't even know what their names were, but we just know that they were out there in the country with them, and then they ended up not coming back to the city. She only had one recorded birth, okay? And you're gonna hear this name a lot. She named the baby Margaret Jane. She named so many of her children Margaret Jane. Yes, she has lots and lots of kids. And Margaret Jane was born in 1856. So the couple, like I say, they moved back to town, back to North England. William works as a fireman for a steam company, and he becomes a coal miner foreman. So, this is pretty good. Sounds like a great marriage, right? Yeah. Besides the fact that she's lost 4 kids, from gastric fever. So she ends up having another kid named Isabella in 1858. But then the Margaret Jane, the one that was recorded, she died in 1860. Okay. It's going to be a trend with this chick because she has another kid after Isabella, named her Margaret Jane, excuse me. And she was born in 1861. And then they had a son named John Robert Williams in 1863, but he died the next year from gastric fever. Okay. It seems like this gastric fever is just absolutely intense, right? Then her husband passes. Yep. Old Robert passes away, and it's from some kind of intestinal something. Some kind of, like I say right now, nobody has any suspicions on what she's doing, They only have, her side of the story basically saying that he died from some kind of intestinal failure. And yeah, that was the end of her first husband. And of course, what does she collect when these children and her husband dies? Life insurance. Oh yes. Always got to have that life insurance in there. They really had to buckle up on this life insurance thing, because let me tell you, last week we talked about a guy that was getting like 30,000 pounds, and this chick is getting like 25 pounds and 3 shillings type stuff. Like, I'm thinking it's because she was marrying coal miners, and to insure a coal miner is almost to make sure, that's a pretty tough job for back then, and a very high mortality rate. So maybe that's why she wasn't getting as much money as these other people that I talked about last week, but she was doing it for the insurance. She would insure her kids, let them live for a little while, and then she would kill them. So, what would she kill them with? Like I said earlier, arsenic. But let's talk about arsenic and kind of what sparked a man to come up with the tests that would actually test for arsenic in the system. So between the 1820s and the 1850s, there was a lot of poisonings happening, okay? And a man decides, he's like, we got to come up with a way. We got to figure out how these people are dying, And so his name was James Marsh. He was a chemist, and in 1832, he comes up with a test that he can do to test a body, any kind of tissue, stomach, or anything like that for arsenic to see if it would actually come up, you know? And he does develop this test, and it goes on to actually solve a lot of, supposed gastric fevers and abdominal illnesses as actually arsenic. Now, arsenic back then can be bought over the counter, like you can buy Tylenol today, okay? It was like on the shelf, and yeah, it was used for a lot of different things. They would put it in water as a tonic. They put it in wafers to help your skin. But if you took it in really, really high dose, first, if you take it in small doses, there's vomiting, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. But if it's like a chronic thing and somebody's poisoning you like over a long period of time, you get thickened skin, darker skin, and cancer. They used to use this stuff in like wallpaper. And of course, rat poison. That's where we mostly hear arsenic come from. But they used to sell it over the counter and I don't know how they used it on wallpaper. I didn't get that deep. But I figure maybe it's the way they stick the wallpaper on. They use that. I don't know, because she ends up trying to use it as part of her defense when she goes to court. All right. So what happens? What does arsenic do to your system? It changes the functioning of 200 different enzymes that you have, and that's not good. So, and then you're just in a lot of pain. You're just very sick. You're very tired. You don't want to do anything. You're lethargic, and it amazes me that nobody caught on to Mary Ann sooner, because she was a nurse. It's like, how did these many people die if you're a nurse? You know what I mean? You know when somebody is sick so bad that they need to go to the hospital. You know what I mean? So that's the story of arsenic and how the Marsh test became available. And of course, the Marsh test will be used in the trial as well. So back to Mary Ann. She just lost her first husband, okay? And she moves, and then she meets somebody new. Of course she does. She moves to Seaham Harbor, and soon after her first husband's death, Mary Ann met a guy named Joseph Natras. She doesn't end up marrying this guy. He's kind of like her lover or whatnot. And they had a relationship, and then her second Margaret Jane daughter, the second one, dies, okay? Same thing. Some kind of gastric fever, or they call it cholera, or they'll call it typhoid, or they'll call it something, And so while she's in a relationship with this dude, she's like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and knock out my daughter while I'm at it. And so that's what she does. And she tries to gain, she takes out life insurance policies on these folks, and that's what happens. And so then she only had one remaining child at this time. Now, with her first husband, she had like 9 kids. She had a lot of kids with him. And with her second husband, she only has one remaining child, which is Isabella. And she sent her to go live with her mom for a while because Mary Ann had gotten a job, and that job was working in like a highly infectious, like smallpox. The name of the place was Recovery for the Cure of Contagious Fever and Humane Society. And so one of her patients' name was George Ward. And he was sick, but he was getting better. And so they got married, And they got married on August 28th, 1865. And even though he was ill, he wasn't like super, super sickly, The doctor just didn't think, that he was like going to die any day or anything like that, And so they think, oh, well, he marries this nurse, so, she's going to take care of him. No. He ends up dying from paralysis and intestinal problems like shortly after they're married. Yeah. Even the guy's doctor is like, okay, this is weird. This man should not have passed this soon. Like, he wasn't that sick, and then all of a sudden now he is. So you got some doctors raising some eyebrows at this point. After the death of her second husband, she collects insurance. Of course she does. Because that's what she does. She just goes through life and kills people and gathers their insurance or whatnot. But after she loses her second husband, she goes and stays with her mom for a while because her daughter Isabella is over there. And after a week of visiting her mom dies. Oh, yes. Her mom dies. And in the meantime, she's met a guy. She started being a housekeeper for a man named James Robinson. Okay. Now, James Robinson was a widower. Okay. I'm guessing that his wife died at giving birth because the baby was like brand new when Marianne starts working for him. Okay. And unfortunately, the baby ends up dying. Okay. So not only has this guy lost his wife, he lost his baby. He has other children too as well, but he's fully distraught, and so she takes full on advantage of this, and she's like, oh, everything's gonna be okay, and snuggles up, and all of a sudden, bam, she's pregnant. Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, after the guy's baby dies of gastric fever, he turns to Marianne for comfort, and that comfort comes in the form of relations, and she gets pregnant, and so they get married. Now, she brings Isabella into the Robinson home, and shortly after that ends up killing her own daughter, Isabella. Yes. I mean, if she will kill her own flesh and blood, then yeah, I guess she will kill anybody. It doesn't really matter, Just saying. So anyway, she collected the life insurance for Isabella, and then Robinson decided, I'm going to marry Marianne. Yes, I am. I'm going to marry this chick. So they get married August 11th, 1867, and they have a child together. And that first child was Margaret Isabel. She always uses the name Margaret. I feel like she has a mom complex. I'm just saying, Anyways, her first child with Robinson was Margaret Isabel, born in November, but then she became ill and died in February of 1868. Like, she literally has kids, and then if she has any remaining kids, she gets rid of them when she has a new kid. And this is all with arsenic. So, her and her third husband have a second child, and his name is George. He was born June 18th of 1869. Now, her third husband has started to become very suspicious of her, okay? And the one thing that that really got him suspicious was when she was like, hey, will you take a life insurance policy out on yourself? Just in case something happens to me, And he thought that was very, very strange because when he had been married that long, they just got married, and then their first child just died. He's lost 3 kids already, 4 kids actually, because of this woman. And he's starting to catch on. And he finds out some other dirty stuff about her too at the same time. Finds out that she's been borrowing money from the bank and not being able to repay it. She had outstanding debts. She was forcing his older children, the 2 that were left, forcing them to like sell off antiques in the home, pawn them for money, and give her the money. This made him so mad. He kicked her out of the house, and of course he kept George, the baby, because George ends up being one of the 2 only surviving babies that she has, and she ends up having 13. So now this guy's like, get out of my house. I'm done with you, And so she's out, and she's homeless. And she doesn't have anywhere to go, But I know none of y'all feel bad for her because I don't. I'm just saying. Now, while she was living on the streets, she meets a girl named Margaret Cotton, okay? And Margaret had a brother, and yeah, she introduced him. Like, hey, look at my friend here. This is Marianne, meet my brother, all that fun stuff. This poor dude was a widower. Frederick Cotton was a widower, and he had already lost 2 of his 4 children, and like I say, he was a widower. And what does that tell you? This is prime target for Marianne right here. This is prime absolute target. She's like, oh, okay, a guy that's sad and also has kids I can take care of. Yeah, sure, I'll do that. And yeah, and so they end up getting married. She marries Frederick Cotton. Now first, Now, Margaret, being the good sister that she is to Frederick, was helping him with the children for a while. Yeah, she's helping him out because, they lost their mom. And so I guess this made Marianne a little bit jealous. And so she ends up killing her friend Margaret Cotton. Yeah, ends up killing her with arsenic. So that way she kind of has her out of the way, and she doesn't have to worry about the aunt mothering her nieces and nephews. Like, why would you kill your friend? Yeah, why would you kill your kid? But hey, here we are. And of course, since he lost his sister, here comes Marianne with the consolation, like, oh, I'm going to console you, and you're going to be just fine, and you're going to knock me up, and then you're going to marry me. And then bam, all that happens. Yeah. She would console him, and then she got pregnant with number 11, just in case we haven't been keeping count. It's hard to keep count, I know. It's a lot of children that she decides to get rid of. So she has 11 kids at this point. She's pregnant with her 11th. And Frederick and Marianne get married on September 17th, 1870. And then Robert was born in early 1871. And then they had another kid that was Frederick Jr., okay? So just imagine, I can't imagine this, carrying all these children to term, having them live, and then you decide to give them the axe. But, let's see what she does with these other kids. Now, after she gives birth to their second kid, she finds out that, remember the guy I was telling y'all earlier, her little lover, Joseph Natras, her lover from earlier, she found out wasn't married anymore, and he was not living very far away from them. So she decides to move the family closer to him so that he can be her lover while she's married to Frederick. And yeah, they move closer to her side piece, basically. But that December, Cotton dies. Her husband dies, yes, from gastric fever. And she has 2 kids from Marianne, and then a previous one. 2 of the kids from Marianne died, and then another one died too. And Marianne collected all the insurance on all of them. I'm telling you, there's just so many. It's confusing, I know. That's why I keep having to look down at my notes, because it's very confusing. This is the 3rd time I've tried to take this, by the way. So after Cotton's death, what happens? Well, Natras becomes Anne's lodger, basically giving her a place to stay, and she becomes a nurse for an officer that is suffering from smallpox, and his name is John Quickmanning. He became a love interest of hers, of course, so you know what that means, and she becomes pregnant with number 12, okay? And then Frederick Jr., the last one, dies March 1872. And then Robert soon after. Actually, I already said that earlier, but they do die. That's how they die. So then, after she, becomes pregnant with kid number 12, Natras becomes really, really ill. Because, she's like got a new side piece now. And she's going to go hang out with that guy because she's pregnant with that guy's kid. Even though Cotton just died, okay? But she doesn't collect on Cotton. She only collects on her kids because there's a man named Thomas Riley. And he has suspicions about this woman, as somebody should by this point, okay? He thinks that Cotton died from some kind of poison, and he wants to preserve a part of him, and told the guy that was doing the postmortem, say, don't put what the cause of death is yet on there, because we don't want her to collect the insurance, and we want to actually, we're going to use the Marsh test to test this part of his stomach and see if he died from arsenic. She had 1 kid left, and it was her stepkid, okay? And she was trying to get rid of her stepkid, and that's why Thomas Riley stepped in. She told Thomas Riley, I need this kid to go stay at a workhouse, basically, okay? And so I want him to stay there and blah, blah, blah. And so then Thomas is like, okay, well, you're going to have to take him yourself. You know, you are obviously his dad has passed, his siblings have passed. You're his only, you're his stepmom. You're going to have to take him down there and all this other stuff. So she says, quote unquote, because she ends up getting a job where she needs to nurse this woman who's sick with smallpox. So, and obviously she can't have kids around that, I'm guessing. And that's why she wanted to send the kid away. So because she didn't want to do it herself, she actually says this: I won't be troubled long. He'll go like all the rest of the Cottons. Now this sparks Thomas. He's like, yeah, this is not cool. We've got to figure this out. 5 days later, what happens? Marianne goes and tells old Thomas, guess what? He died. So we're good to go. I can go and nurse this person now. Riley went to the police. Thomas Riley. He went to the police and he told them what was going on, like straight up. It's like, I think this woman I think she poisoned this kid. And I think she poisoned Cotton. And of course, when they did the marsh test, it came back positive for arsenic. So although she only goes on trial for one, they end up digging up Cotton's body and like testing it, like to make sure they were absolutely correct that it was arsenic, and it was because of the marsh test. And an inquest was held though, because they wanted a jury to decide if this man had died of natural causes or was poisoned. Okay. Now the jury said natural causes. And because Marianne said that she had tried to treat the child with arrowroot, and that Riley was obsessed with her and like wanted to be with her, and she rejected his advances, and that's the only reason why he's saying all this stuff now. Like, girly pop, what are you saying? Like, give me a break. That man don't want you. Not every single man you meet wants you, you know? I mean, give me a break. The local news grabbed hold of this story and they flew with it. Absolutely flew with it, guys. A local story, they said she lost 3 husbands, 1 lover, 11 kids, 1 friend, and her mom. Okay, and they all died of stomach fever, gastric fever, or whatnot. Okay, they named her the Black Widow. The newspaper did. You know, when the newspaper says something, that's pretty much. So, what do? Because of the samples they kept from Charles, they tested from all the rumors. The marsh test was done and it showed arsenic. So the doctor told the police, hey, guess what? We found arsenic in Cotton, and we need you to go and arrest Marianne. And so they do. By the way, the trial had to be postponed a little bit because she was pregnant again. Yeah, with number 13. This is with John Quick Manning's kid or whatnot. Yeah. So the trial began on March 5th of 1873, and the defense used that Cotton had inhaled something off the wallpaper because, like I told y'all, arsenic was used in wallpaper. Then they tried to blame the pharmacist, saying that maybe he mixed up the medications or something like that. He says he never uses the arsenic paint. He doesn't leave the arsenic powder next to the other powders just for the sole reasoning because he knows that it's toxic. And so not all that fell flat. It only took 90 minutes and the jury was like guilty, like 100% guilty. Yeah, definitely. Now here comes her hanging. Oh yes. In March 24th, 1873 is the date that she's hung. She gets up to the gallows, okay? And as I talked to you guys earlier, and especially in the Bess Clark video, how the executioner has to like take your height and your weight to determine how long to make the rope and things like that to make sure everything goes smoothly. It's literally his job, right? So our girl Marianne, not really our girl, she's a serial killer. Marianne gets up to the gallows, has the noose put around her neck, but the rope was too short. So when they dropped her and she fell, the rope was too short that it didn't snap her neck. So the executioner had to push down on her shoulders to get her neck to break. It took a total of 3 minutes for this woman to die by being hung. 3 minutes. When normally it's like that. Maybe they struggle for a few 15 seconds or so, or something like that. But this woman held on for 3 minutes. Like, it is absolutely insane. And this is something my husband said. He was like, what if it was done on purpose? I was like, what if? What if this was done on purpose? What if this wasn't like a, oops, I accidentally made the rope too short? Or was it karma? Maybe karma just wanted her to suffer a little bit, just as all of her children had suffered. Okay. I mean, so out of her 13 children, only 2 survived. Okay. Margaret Edith lived from 1873 to 1954. And then, of course, George, who was taken by James after that was her 3rd husband that kicked her out. He ended up living, obviously, because he was never around Mary Ann again. So, yeah, good for him. So that is Britain's first female serial killer. And the reason why I did her was because of the poison. And the poison is, like I said last week, we have to have that knowledge of what poisons are, because there are some that can help people, but of course anything in large doses is not going to be good for you. Anything that in large doses is just not. And and then the fact that she said you tried to treat one of her kids with arrowroot, that kind of gave me a little witchy vibe there, because even I have some arrowroot. But this lady had no remorse. She was cold. First she cried and stuff, when she was said that to be guilty, but then she's kind of realized, okay, well, this is, why am I crying? I'm a cold-hearted bee or whatever, and that's just the way it is, type shit. This woman is absolutely horrible. She killed so many people, and I had to do her just because she was so. Last week we had talked about strychnine, and arsenic has always been. It sparked a test, because so many people were using it in the Victorian era to kill people because of this whole insurance thing that had come out, All of that was brand new. So, I don't know. It's a wild story. I know it's a lot of names and things like that, and I hope I didn't confuse y'all too much. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. And if nobody tells you today, I love you. And I hope you guys have a glorious week.